Welcome to Wimmer's Wilderness. I'm your host, George Wimmer. I have 30 years of volunteer work, community organizing, and 16 years in local government, 12 of those as mayor. Wimmer's Wilderness is an informed look at politics, community, government, environment, and education from a local perspective. Today we're joined by Kristen and Lola, who are the co-directors of the Minnesota GreenStep program. And I just want to introduce my complete and absolute biased opinion that the GreenStep program is phenomenal. I fell in love with the program back in 2015 when I was the mayor of the city of Isanti and had seen some information that they had presented at a league conference. And that's where, like I said, I just fell in love with this program. It is just phenomenal of how it gets you, even in a small government situation, to think about your impact on your community and environment on every single decision and kind of process you do. So, Kristen, you want to kind of start us off and just tell us a little bit about yourself and, what got you to this point of where you're at and saving the world one day at a time.
Yeah, thanks, George. So I'm Kristen Mroz. I am one of the co-directors of the GreenStep Cities and Tribal Nations program, and I work at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. I've always been interested in sustainability. I remember back in college not really knowing I wanted to work in the environmental field, but not being able to pick one specific area. Water issues, interested in, was of interest to me just as much as plants and biodiversity. And so I'm really fortunate to be able to be in this position to work with a program that works in sustainability overall. And, I myself also get to learn new things every day because sustainability touches everything, from environmental sustainability, but also economic and social equity as a piece of that. And so I have been with the program for about 4 years now in a co-director role. But prior to that, worked in a city in central Minnesota and was on the flip side actually implementing actions and metrics as a part of the program. And so understand, how a city benefits from the program and participates as a part of it.
What was the process, Kristen, for you when, you were looking at different places to try to, apply your skills and some of your interests that led you to this specific avenue versus other options?
I guess, to be honest, I might have lucked into it. I think going back to my work at the city and who was already participating in the program when I first started there. So I got to learn about the GreenStep program, as a part of that job. And when an opportunity popped up at the state to help co-direct the program, I felt that I could help multiple cities across the state, with the program development and improvements overall that can further help support communities in Minnesota working on their sustainability and quality of life goals and actions.
Well, and being in a smaller community, it definitely helps to have that expert, opinions and help trying to improve in each of our individual communities. Lola, what kind of brought you to the table? And you're coming at this from a little bit of a different angle with a different agency, and kind of tell us what got you interested in doing this and what led you into this partnership.
Thank you, George. My name is Lola Schoenrich, and I lead the communities level work at a nonprofit organization called the Great Plains Institute, which is a private nonprofit organization that works on transforming the energy system to benefit people, the economy, and the environment. And I've been there about 12 years. I got involved with GreenStep Cities really, I guess I could say helping to start it. I worked for 20 years at a different organization called the Minnesota Project, where I did work with mostly in greater Minnesota with communities on solid waste issues, energy issues, and broader sustainability issues. And in that role, I really was so impressed by the ability of small communities to be nimble and to really transform themselves. Small communities, I think, in some ways are more able to take action and change. A couple people with a vision in a small community can really get something done, where as a couple of people in New York City can't do much. And so that was really always a lot of fun working with communities like Isanti. So I'm really pleased to be on this show. I think that in some ways the work that you do is luck. I too, like Kristen, was always interested in environmental issues, and it happened that the first job I got out of college was as a home energy auditor. So I learned a lot about energy efficiency and conservation and the energy system in general, and really have been working in that space all along.
You know, you talked about sustainability and something we've covered here a lot, but sustainability and resiliency. Could you talk a little bit about how, you know, the GreenStep program helps communities become more resilient as a lot of different things are changing around? Because there's actually a lot of good cost savings that comes along with this environmental thinking of your decision making within communities.
Well, you're absolutely right. And that's always been one of the selling points and reasons to be doing energy conservation work in buildings and in lighting. There definitely are cost savings, and there can be cost savings in waste management and in lots of other environmental projects and initiatives.
Yeah, a few of the benefits of communities participating in the program find themselves that they're saving staff time by not having to research best practice actions. Our program and website lists over 170 different best practice actions across buildings and lighting, transportation, community development, waste, etc. And our actions list the implementation tools and resources that can help guide the community to actually implementing those actions, and provide technical experts or advisors that can help assist them with that work. And so, you know, we see ourselves as a one-stop shop for communities working on environmental sustainability action who can go to a website and find everything, you know, with a couple of clicks to be able to make movement. You know, what we want to see is the action happening here. And like Lola mentioned, we often find that a lot of the actions do save money over time. And, you know, the actions that we work to promote are really about spending the same amount of money as a city or using money more smartly to, you know, benefit the community over time. Another benefit, I think, you know, in talking about money savings for communities is that the GreenStep program can sometimes open up special opportunities for a community who might be applying for a grant or technical assistance through, here in Minnesota, we have a Green Corps program, which is an AmeriCorps program with a one-year term of a member going to a community, for example, and helping to implement some of these sustainability actions. And being a GreenStep community can, you know, bump up the points that they might receive in their application to showcase that they're, taking sustainability seriously and want to be working on this area by being a GreenStep city or tribal nation, and think that some of the grant funders or these other technical assistance opportunities really, see value in that.
George, I think another really important part of resilience that's sometimes overlooked is the human connection. One of the things that we at GreenStep try to do is help people make connections with each other. So connect the folks in Isanti who are working on GreenStep with peer communities that are near them or interested in the same thing, because that's where people get a lot of information about what's working and what isn't working. I wonder if that would work for us. Plus, about half of the GreenStep cities have some kind of green team that engages usually community members and staff, and they work together to both identify projects and get them done.
Yeah, and it acts kind of as a clearinghouse of ideas. Let's walk through the process. How do you plan to go out and get those communities involved, and what are those processes? I came begging to you guys for help because I was so jazzed about it, but how do you get other people involved?
Yeah. So I guess to start with, how many communities are currently involved? We right now have 137 cities across the state and 4 tribal nations. We actually have a tribal nation pilot program of the cities program, and so together we've got 141 communities. You will hear us talk about communities rather than cities, but the majority in our program are certainly cities. And so I think overall, I think Lola mentioned that covers about 50% of the state's population. Combine all of those communities together, anywhere from big communities, biggest being St. Paul, to our smallest being the city of Hewitt with 300 people in population. 35% of our communities are actually 5,000 in population or fewer. The program was really built for small and medium-sized communities, knowing that our larger communities have more resources and opportunities at their fingertips than our smaller and medium-sized communities. We have both urban and rural communities. Over 50% of GreenStep communities are located in greater Minnesota. We find that our communities span both liberal and conservative leaning, at least in the way that their residents vote for state and national elections. And so we kind of spread equally across the state. And when we find a community who reaches out to us who might be interested in joining, we are, more than happy to connect with them. We have regional coordinators across the state who can attend a city council meeting, for example, or maybe it's an environmental commission, and share more about the program and how it works, what it takes to participate in the program, and what are those next steps. And so we'll do that. In a typical year, we also attend the League of Minnesota Cities annual conference, and this is a really great opportunity that really can connect with community or cities that haven't participated in the program or don't know much about the program. We have a table at their event that we can talk to people as they're passing. We hold sessions on sustainability and also have an award ceremony that can really help highlight some of the successes that we've seen in cities participating that year and really share those stories to the cities that haven't yet joined the program. And so we're really fortunate to have great partners with the League who can kind of, certainly is that trusted resource for cities across the state and can help us really share the story of city successes.
One of the things that I really like about the GreenStep program, because it's through, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but through the Minnesota Pollution Agency, right? MPCA. I guess sometimes you can think of an agency like that as an enforcement agency, maybe a little bit of a, I don't want to say negative reputation, but more the enforcement kind of wing, whereas GreenStep's one really helps to educate people that the MPCA is out there to actually help and to find solutions, not just, kind of bring down the hammer on things. But it gives that, it to me, it's a great, and I know this probably isn't the intent, but it's an excellent PR wing for them, because it really shows in such a positive way how we can solve problems without it getting to a point where there needs to be, regulation and enforcement and that type of thing. So I really appreciate how GreenSteps is such a positive, affirming type of an organization, and I think that's really reflective in the people who work with it.
Yeah, the program is really built as a non-regulatory program, and I think you're right, George, that a lot of times with state agencies involved, cities might, think that we're, trying to push regulation on them, but in reality, this is a voluntary program that cities join at, and they implement actions on their own pace. There are no requirements, in terms of the actions that cities need to do, other than a few to get to some higher steps. There are some expectations, but again, it's a voluntary program, so not required. But, the program is really built around those non-regulatory, kind of above and beyond. What are things that cities, tribal communities can do to really move their sustainability action forward?
Lola, with your background and work with Great Plains, with that being a nonprofit group versus the other side of being a governmental agency, how do you see that relationship continuing and being effective? Is it reliant upon somebody like you who's very supportive of the GreenStep program, or is this something that's just ingrained in an organization so that 20 years from now there'll be somebody from there involved with this program as well?
I hope that's true. Great Plains Institute is committed to working on energy and climate issues across the whole spectrum of government and community. So we do some of our work is at the national level and some with states. And then there's a role for local governments as well. There are responsibilities and roles that local governments have that nobody else does. So, for instance, local governments are responsible for land use and transportation systems, typically, and also have a lot to do with how buildings are, where and how buildings are built, and the attributes of buildings. So an example I like to use is that if you live in an apartment in a city and you're interested in getting an electric vehicle, the only person who can tell the developer of a new building, or the only entity that can work with the developer to make sure that a new apartment complex has a place to plug in an electric vehicle, is the local government. And similarly, local governments have things that they are doing to think through electric vehicle charging infrastructure that will help people that live in, the city as a whole, and shop there, and then also live in apartments that might not have dedicated parking lots.
I want to interject for a second, because I love that example. My last 2 years as mayor, we did 3 fairly significant projects, and all 3 of those had put in that to have charging stations, because you're absolutely right. It's from a local government standpoint, we went from 0 to 9 charging stations in about a year and a half. For us, was pretty significant.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We're just it's one of those things that at the local level, communities understanding that they can do that and the need. And I think sometimes local government officials, knowing what the true need is out there, and knowing what percentage of your population have that type of need, or how many people are coming into your community. So we did it at a hotel, a medical clinic, and at our New Coburn's grocery store. How many people are coming in that would take advantage of that and help promote your community as well. So I think having that mindset
right.
is really important.
There's one other thing I wanted to mention about that, which is that, and why we're involved in GreenStep cities, is that the original idea of GreenStep cities, which actually came out of a series of meetings that the Clean Energy Resource Team were doing around the state in partnership with the state energy office that were about community energy. A number of people had this idea of like, could there be a program that supported local governments to take action, do more with clean energy and maybe climate? As we were reaching out and talking to communities and developing and shaping the program, what we heard is that all of these issues are so interrelated at the local level that a climate program or a clean energy program by itself wouldn't really help us that much. Energy is integrally related to housing and the way our streets are laid out and whether that we have sidewalks and kids can walk to school safely, at how much green space we have, whether we take care of our trees, what are we going to do about the ash borer. All these issues are interrelated. And you mentioned yourself that one of the things you like about GreenStep is it helps you and others in Isanti to think about sustainability within the context of all of your decisions.
Yeah, and it was when my wife and I first moved to Isanti in 2001. Over the next 4 years, we had 3 100-year rain events. And I was thinking, this was before I got involved with local government at all, and I was thinking that definition doesn't seem to be right anymore. And so, it really got me interested in doing rain gardens and things like that, and then partnering with our local soil and water to set up a program to incentivize homeowners to do their own rain gardens and things along that line. Does GreenSteps partner with soil and water on the county level? Do they do different things like that as well?
Yeah, George, we have had a number of requests to have a GreenStep counties program, maybe for part of that reason. But yeah, we do rely on a number of partners, and part of it is just sharing information about things that soil and water conservation districts or the Board of Water and Soil Resources, have available. They have tools and resources that can help cities implement these actions and connect with their residents or businesses as well. And so, we try to share and promote those as a part of it. And they were certainly involved, many of which were involved in the actual initial decisions on the actual best practice language that's a part of the program today, and really partner-led through multiple organizations, agencies, and communities themselves since the beginning. And we continuously work to make sure that our best practice actions are up to date and remain challenging to communities. We don't want something on there that every city's doing. We want to be continually challenging communities and taking action and making sure that we have the resources, which are hard to keep up with. There are so many out there, especially, in a program that can be so broad around sustainability, but it's certainly something we rely on our partners like that to do.
GreenSteps, like what you said there, it can be so broad, and sometimes it might feel like you're trying to boil the ocean. How do you keep your focus in certain areas when obviously you want to be open to all kinds of new ideas and new types of ways of doing things? But it seems like it could be something that it just gets to be so expansive, and maybe that's a positive. I don't know. But I mean, do you ever feel like it is so much that it's hard to keep the direction going?
I think our cities certainly feel that way sometimes.
I would say that, Kristen, if I can jump in, I think there's a couple resources that GreenStep has that can help with that. And one is that there's a way on the webpage for participating cities to sort the actions by different topics. So if a city is particularly interested in, you've mentioned flooding and resilience a couple of times, there's a way to sort the actions, or sometimes communities they have a big health initiative, and there's a way to sort actions by several different topics. And then the other thing that can be helpful is, Kristen, you keep track of which step each city is at and what things they have done. And what they would need to do to get to the next step, because there are 5 steps in GreenStep cities that are, and so there's like a spreadsheet that Kristen can provide that is kind of a roadmap to moving forward.
I think cities find that, there's 170 actions, and I don't think any one city has or is ever going to do all of those. So really, in the end, it's a menu of ideas and opportunities for a city to think about and really create their own roadmap and what are those needs or interests in the community. If Isanti has flooding issues, maybe that helps prioritize some of the actions, but not all of our cities, have water bodies. And so that might not be something that is challenging them. I think one thing to add too is our steps 4 and 5 shift more towards around metric reporting. And so what are those outcomes and those data points that can help a city understand where they're at in their sustainability journey? And that in turn can help prioritize cities' actions in certain areas. So if they're not improving their metrics year over year, that can help identify those action areas to return back to those 170 different best practice actions and select from those the ones that might help them implement improvements over time.
You get that first contact with the community. What is the process that a community would do to go from step 1 to step 5? And are there kind of averages of time it takes? Obviously, with so many different communities, it's going to vary quite a bit, but going from that, beginning to end, but it's really not an end because you need to sustain those practices. So kind of walk us through that process.
Yeah, sure. So, a city chooses to join the program voluntarily, and to do that, we ask that they do a city resolution with the city council, just as a commitment to participating in the program and working on sustainability actions. And so at that point, we categorize our communities based off of 3 different categories, which looks at the overall capacity, how many buildings does the city operate, how many full-time staff does the city have. Then in turn challenges our larger capacity communities to take more action than what we expect one of our smaller capacity cities to be able to take. And so we ask that communities take a certain number of actions based off of their size and capacity to reach step 2. And that's any action of their choice. And so this is the real opportunity for the city to think about what their priorities and needs are and where they want to implement those actions. Cities can also report on actions that they've already completed. So things they've done in the past. We want to recognize them for efforts at any point. Step 3 becomes more challenging, as you would expect. And there are a few best practice actions that we expect a city at that level to complete. And examples would include a comprehensive plan that the city has really looked at their land use overall and is planning for, their future, that they are recording energy benchmarking of their city facilities. And so looking at the energy used on a monthly basis to be able to understand those facilities better, and a couple more. They will complete those, and there are also some expectations of doing a certain number of best practice actions in each of the different category areas so that a city is really expanding their work beyond, we certainly have communities who are really dedicated and interested in water quality and stormwater, for example, but we want to expand their work into all of the areas of sustainability. And so we take a look at that, and that's when we really pull out that spreadsheet that Lola mentioned to help identify what is needed for that community to reach step 3. And then I mentioned step 4 and step 5, and this is looking at a menu of metrics that we've identified that can help the community understand where they're at in terms of having implemented certain actions. It also includes demographic metrics from census data, for example, of how many residents are biking to work, or, what are the affordable housing units that are available in the community. And those kinds of metrics can help get the city look at areas that they might need to work on improvement in overall. And step 5 is really based on showing that improvement. And so we're looking at year-over-year metrics that can help identify, where a city is improving or not. And ideally, that then rounds out the program to help identify those priority areas that a city might want to go back to those actions under steps 2 and 3 that they were working on, and work a little bit more in that action area and come back and look at their metrics and see if those actions really did, create some improvement in their space.
How long does it take to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3? And again, on averages, I think we were to step 3, year 1, 4, year 2, something like that. My staff at a certain point wanted to throw me out the window because, again, I was so excited about, us trying to get to the, to really try to implement as much of it as possible. But it is, especially when you get to that step 4 and then step 5, there's a lot of staff time. And in smaller communities that can be limiting. Yeah,
definitely. So I think it definitely depends on the community. We have communities that have signed that resolution and haven't made any progress. And that's okay. Again, it's a voluntary program. Cities are working at their own pace, identifying their own needs. And we do also find that cities really do need that champion. And so, as mayor, George, you sound like you were that champion for the city and really getting staff and the community excited about participating. But if a city loses that champion, we find sometimes that sustainability just doesn't always rise to the top of the priorities, unfortunately. I think Isanti is a great example of, really jumping into the program and taking it seriously and reaching step 5 in a matter of years is a really proud accomplishment. And I can't say that all of our communities are able to do that, but I think, within a couple, 3 to 5 years, the city probably could easily get to that step 5 pace. Some cities, are able to reach multiple steps within a year, which always shocks me, because you're right. It does take some staff time, or in some cases citizen volunteer time to do this. We're asking for reports on the actions that have been taken. We're asking for some some research and homework into identifying those metrics. As much as we try to make everything easy and accessible, there is definitely commitment there to really do those reports and identify those metrics and send that information to us. And there's often some back and forth with us in trying to clarify what it is that's being reported. And I think that just really indicates the community's understanding and of the benefits that taking action in these areas has to the community overall. Seeing, more and more of our communities include sustainability in their mission statements, in their comprehensive plans, hiring full-time sustainability staff, because they see that sustainability, like Lola mentioned, touches everything community, and having a program like this that can help coordinate those efforts can create real quality of life improvements and benefits to the community operations, but also the residents and businesses that live and work within them.
The great part of, a lot of great parts of GreenSteps, but of having that roadmap of how to get from point A to point B, and I'm going to use that as my transition, Lola, to complement the Great Plains Institute on their roadmap. Done some reading on that in the last week or two, of having those kinds of things in place so that you can make purposeful decisions. And I think that's one of the great things about GreenSteps and that whole process, especially when you get to those later steps, is making purposeful decisions, that you have a lot of good information that, maybe you wouldn't think about initially, but when you're making a decision, whether it's in the planning and zoning, when you're saying, okay, this is what our impervious surface standard is, and this is how it's going to affect our stormwater system, that eventually, maybe going into holding pond A that has to be cleaned out X amount of times, and then it goes into, this river, that type of things, but really making people think of that entire process. And I think organizations like this really get people to connect all of the dots. And again, I think it's done in such a positive way that it might sneak up on some people that they're actually, really thinking through these things. And I just want to compliment the Great Plains Institute, because I like how a lot of that information is laid out, that I've read in the last few weeks here as well.
Well, thank you. You've mentioned another thing that we try to do in GreenStep cities, which is identify the most useful tools and resources that local governments can use. So there are sometimes like an endless number of different tools to look at flooding data, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And GreenStep tries to pick out the one or two that will be most useful to communities in Minnesota. And I know that one of the things that we really heard when we were starting the program from communities is, particularly smaller communities, staff people don't have time
mm-hmm.
to search the internet and look into every single tool that might be there and try to pick out the best one. It's most useful if somebody can point you right in the right direction so that you have the data that's most relevant to your community.
It's essentially a free consulting service. That's what, the mm-hmm. way that I kind of looked at it, that we have these great experts who have accumulated all this information, and they're offering to help us get to a great point and not charging us for the advice. So you don't get that deal every day. So
yeah.
So we have the Minnesota GreenStep organization, and we have other states involved, other regions. Could you, either of you, talk to that point, and how does that interlink together? Because I think, Lola, you had talked about earlier about how all these differing communities, how they're tying together. Just one of them doing it is great, but it's better when you can get more and more and more involved. So if you could talk about how mm-hmm. this process is spread out further than just the state of Minnesota.
Thank you for bringing that up. I am also the coordinator of a national network of sustainability or climate programs that are similar to GreenStep cities. It's called the Sustainable States Network. And it turns out that there are actually 15 programs around the country that are very, very similar to GreenStep cities. There's a cluster of them in the Midwest, in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Indiana. There's a cluster in New England, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York. There's a cluster in the mid-Atlantic states, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, and there's two in the South, one in Georgia and one in Florida, and then there's one in California, and there might be some others that we don't know about. Many of them about the same age as GreenStep cities, 8 to 10 years old. They're all voluntary. They're all statewide. They all try to provide and do provide guidance with the best practices, actions that are suggested. They all work in different ways or similar ways, actually, to add capacity to local governments by connecting folks with resources that can help them, whether that be your utility or somebody at the university or another academic institution or an AmeriCorps or a student intern. They provide tools, data, training, workshops. They connect people. They recognize success, and they help communities to measure and track success. And interestingly, they all develop, most of them, more or less independently. So it seems like a model that works
Mm-hmm.
Together, they engage over 2,000 communities around the country. And being in a network helps these programs to, like Kristen and me, helps us learn from each other. We see what they're doing in New York. Oh, my God, that's such an interesting way that you're tracking data. I wonder if we could do that. And then we're developing some tools together because these programs are all 8 to 10 years old. They were developed, most of them, at a time before communities and people that work with communities were thinking about equity and the role of local governments in helping and supporting their most vulnerable and disadvantaged residents. That's thought about differently now than it was 10 years ago. So we have been working collaboratively across 6 states to help them evaluate their programs with a national consultant. One of those is GreenStep cities. And programs are taking a look at their best practices to make sure that they're doing no harm and hopefully promoting well-being of all the residents. And then second, many of the programs are providing guidance on how communities can more effectively do community engagement. You know, as a mayor, there are lots of requirements about holding public hearings and so on, but not everybody comes to public hearings.
Or at times nobody comes to public hearings.
Or at times nobody comes. And then people find out about something later.
Yes.
Much further along in the planning process and might be mad that they feel as though they didn't know that the city was going to take away parking on their street or put a sidewalk in where they didn't want one. And next thing you know, the city council's overrun people that have a set of concerns that they didn't feel they had a chance to air previously.
That's a battle scar that I think everyone in local government shares.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then there have emerged different tools or like sets of questions that local government folks can use to evaluate new programs and policies to ask themselves who benefits from this and who's burdened from this, and then use that information to make decisions, add that to their decision-making process. We're also doing a project with 30 cities in 5 states that's been a lot of fun called the Sustainable States Community Energy Challenge. It's a partnership with a national organization called ACEEE. ACEEE does an annual scorecard. The core city of the 100 biggest major metropolitan areas in the country. And they have a scoring tool they use, but they've also adapted it for smaller cities. And we partnered with them, helped 30 cities in these 5 states to use this tool and kind of benchmark where they are. 3 Minnesota cities were in the top 10, and it was St. Louis Park, Red Wing, and Rochester, which goes to show that it's another example of small cities can be leaders.
Absolutely, and a good tradition in Minnesota of leading nationally as well.
Yeah, and of course, Red Wing and Rochester are quite different sizes with quite different capabilities, and Red Wing's number 9 and Rochester's number 10.
It's quite a testament to what communities can do when they put their mind to it. If you get everybody kind of working towards a purpose, there's really you can be incredibly successful. I was curious, you know, as your organizations are tremendous repositories of information, knowledge, experience, how do you help to impact policy at the state level and national level? You know, because from a local standpoint, you know, there's good feedback back and forth and that type of thing. And then where's that line that, okay, well, I'm working for this group, I can't cross over into the policy area, or I can, or how does that all work? Because it's great to have a lot of these programs like this, but there can also be some real positives achieved by having this law or this regulation impacted or changed as well.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Kristen, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I think I'm going to turn it over to you though, Lola. But I think the GreenStep Cities program itself is not political, and we don't advocate for specific policy, but I know that a number of our communities have participated in that, sometimes through the League of Minnesota Cities, sometimes through their own cohorts or network. And Lola, I don't know if you can speak to anything that the Great Plains Institute has been involved with.
Sure. I think that this is one of the areas where having multiple partners in the GreenStep Cities program is helpful. As Kristen mentioned, the League of Minnesota Cities has a whole policy process every year where they engage elected officials and city leaders around the state and develop policy positions that their board adopts and lobbyists at the Capitol and so on. Kristen and anybody in the state agency is never going to be seen in a GreenStep Cities t-shirt leading a rally, of course.
Yes.
Great Plains Institute also is not a traditional advocacy organization in the sense that we do a lot of education about policy and consensus building work and are not one of the advocacy groups at the Capitol unless it's in the name of a consensus process we have led. One of the things we do is that we have provided quite a bit of technical assistance to GreenStep Cities on energy and climate issues and have an ongoing network of city staff that are sustainability directors or public works folks, people that are working on those issues in their own city, where they're sharing information. And one of the things we are doing is helping those folks learn about sort of their limitations, if you will. So there are many things, as I said before, that local governments can do that no one else can do. But many local governments are setting goals like they want 100% renewable energy, or they want clean energy, or they want to address climate or resilience. And the state has a role to play, of course. Isanti is not in charge of, even if you have a municipal utility, the mayor and the council is not fully in charge of what the local utility is able to do. And so we are helping folks learn about the impact of state policy and then the work of the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission that regulates electric and gas utilities, and what some of those decisions, how those decisions impact what cities are interested in. And the network, the Community Energy Network it's called, is a place where cities that are working on specific policies can share information and tell each other about what they're doing and recruit others to join them. So, for instance, this year in Minnesota, there's a group of cities that are working with some of the energy organizations to improve the Minnesota Commercial Energy Code, because that's many communities. The commercial buildings in the community actually are a big slice of the energy use in the community. And we have in Minnesota State building code, Isanti and other communities are not allowed to innovate and invent your own code. And so for new construction and major renovations, it falls back to the state code, which could be improved. And communities are saying, we're not going to meet our goals unless you all at the state level improve the building code quicker than you are.
Well, and I think the position that both of you are in, and as things change year over year, what one year may not seem to be a political thing sometimes morphs into it, and having that skill set to, continue to just keep doing the good work that you're doing and keeping, everybody positive about what it is you're doing, I think really makes a program like GreenStep's work, because even just going off of the Great Plains Institute, the roadmap to, decarbonization, which unfortunately that seems to be more of a political statement in some camps versus others. And I'm not going to ask either one of you any questions about that, because you are as apolitical as you're supposed to be. But it's one of the things that I think becomes concerning and can take away from it. And I applaud the two of you for, just getting good, positive results based on the science and based on, the best practices and everything that's been put together here. So I think that is a fine line that the right personalities can do. I can't. I would probably get fired from your jobs in 10 seconds because I can't keep my opinions to myself. But I really do think that having the right people in your positions does make a world of difference. And I really do thank you for doing that job.
We hope so. We're both having a lot of fun.
Yes, and that's really comes through the passion of it and the enjoyment of it. What would both of you, and I'd really love to hear from both of you on this, what would you tell somebody who's 10, 12, 14 years old? I know at the state fair we had come up to one booth, and I chaperoned it's probably either my son or daughter's group when they went there for school. But somebody who's looking at it and saying, wow, what you're doing this is great. How do I get there? What should I study in school? What should I, what kind of work experience should I have? So whoever would like to start.
Yeah, it makes me think about, we have a few communities who joined GreenStep cities at the request of youth in their community. And so we know that youth are paying attention to what their cities are doing or not doing around sustainability and climate, and they are thinking about their future in their community and wanting to see real action happen. And so I think we've talked about how sustainability and climate really touches every area in community work, and so having that broad understanding of multiple different areas around environmental, climate, and sustainability is important to be able to have these kinds of conversations with your community or with your neighbors, and be able to start thinking about those ways that might improve something today, but they might be actions that you don't see benefits for, until years down the road. If you're talking about water quality, those things take decades, if not centuries, to fix. And so being able to really understand those multiple co-benefits that might, come across by taking these actions, or being able to make those connections to, the certain partners that you might not have thought about in the beginning, in certain areas that you might be working in, but could really help support this work. I think having that broad understanding of how communities operate and do their day-to-day work is important. I know a lot of cities across Minnesota have youth commissioners or mayor for a day programs that can really start getting students involved in community operations and politics even, and really being able to think about how these, even small changes can have real benefit.
Lola, what advice would you give somebody who's thinking about this or interested in going into what it is that you do?
I think it's such a good question, George. And my advice to young people is in a way the same as my advice to communities. Sustainability and climate are such big topics that you can start anywhere. The main thing is to get started and to kind of put one foot in front of the other. And so my advice to young people that are interested in the environment and sustainability is to get involved in something. It could be an environment club in their school. It could be a class project. It could be making sure that you're recycling at home. And one thing tends to lead to another, and people, as you learn more, you might probably will focus in on one issue or another, or you'll be like Kristen and me and interested in lots of things and be
make up our mind.
Be working broadly, get involved in an Earth Day city cleanup, help plant trees, whatever seems interesting and exciting, and that way you meet people that have similar interests and you get involved and you learn more about what's possible and what you really care most about.
And it is an area where every community needs and wants volunteers, especially in the realms of, cleaning parks or planting trees.
There's one other thing I say to young people, which is I ask them how old they will be in 2050.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, the climate modeling and most of the discussion about climate tends to be about what has to be done before the change that has to happen by 2050.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer, if you're in your early 20s or younger, is that you're going to be in your 50s or 60s in 20 and 30 years. And so then I tell people, it's on you.
Yes. And it's
to solve this problem. I'll be retired. Kristen, you'll be retired. And so I think it's really, really important that people don't waste their time on things that don't matter.
No, and I think that's
and that our generations are.
Go ahead, Kristen.
We just need to make sure that our generations are doing everything that we can to support those future generations as well. We might not see the benefits of some of our action today, but taking any action now is going to help our future generations be able to right the wrongs, even in a better position.
Well, and I try to explain to my kids too that, okay, well, we're planting trees, I may not get the full benefit of a tree that's going to take, 50 years to grow, but it's something that you want to do for the next generation. But also telling them that there was a period of time when you couldn't swim in some of the Great Lakes because they were so polluted. They've been cleaned up. And now there's some tendency to where there may be some more environmental damage if we're not watching what we're doing. Things can ebb and flow. Just because something may have been cleaned up or something may be okay today doesn't mean that we forget about that, because in 20 years from now, we might be back where we were before. So kind of always having that constant vigilance.
That's right. So I love what you said, Kristen. If you're 14 or 15, make sure the adults in your life are doing the best they can to solve the problems you care about, whether that's your family or your mayor or your city council or whoever. And learn, too, because you're right, George. When I was growing up, you couldn't eat the fish in Lake Erie or Lake Michigan. And the Cuyahoga River in Ohio was on fire.
Yes.
Like literally burning. There was so much oil floating on it. But it's not anymore.
And hopefully if we keep going in the right direction, it won't be again. But it could be if we lose sight of that.
Yeah, right. We do need to keep at it.
So is there anything else that we should really cover?
So proud of all of the actions that we're seeing, reported from our communities. And we find that Minnesota cities that are participating in the GreenStep program are real leaders in this area. Some of them were the first at becoming a Tree City USA, or converting their traffic signals to LED lights, or using 100% renewable energy for their city operations. And these are things that, may have certainly occurred regardless of whether or not the GreenStep Cities program existed, but we help share those stories. And we are not a competition, but I think sometimes our cities think that we are. And when they have a neighboring community that is taking the lead in any of these sustainability or climate areas, that makes them want to do so as well. And that momentum really carries throughout the program. And that's what we want to see. We want to see that energy behind taking action and really seeing the benefits from doing so and the outcomes of the quality of life for their residents and businesses and the community overall and the environment in which the community sits.
Any additional information, Lola, that you think we'd want to let our listeners know?
I think this has been a fun conversation, and I don't know that we've said out loud that the vision of GreenStep Cities and of the Sustainable States Network is that sustainability is the norm for all communities. So that's broadly what we're working towards. And it's a pleasure to talk to you because you clearly share the same vision and are part of making that happen.
How do our listeners find out about the different programs and Great Plains, GreenSteps, the larger network? What are your websites? And we'll link all of this in our podcast notes as well, so it'll appear for people there as well as on all of our social media.
Yeah, if you're a state outside of Minnesota, starting with the Sustainable States Network, I think it's .net. Is that right, Lola?
Yep.
Website is definitely a good place to go. See if your state has a program available for your community. And then if you're in Minnesota, it's mngreenstep.org. And you can see all of the different communities that are currently participating. You can see the different best practice areas. You don't have to be a participant in the program to look at the implementation tools or the best practice actions or find those technical experts. Our information is available and open to anyone who's interested in that.
And just for the GreenSteps, because that's the one I'm familiar with, it is tremendous the amount of information that is shared. You can go into, even if your city's not part of the program, click into a city, you can see all the steps they've taken, all the information, all the detail, and it is really, again, I'm biased because I think the program is incredible, but it's just amazing the amount of detailed information that is shared on the GreenSteps page about all these different communities, and I think that alone could really spark some interest.
Yeah, exactly right, George. I mean, I think that's one of the benefits too, is that you can go on and see, if you live in a city that's participating, you can see the actions that they've taken. You can compare, yourself to another community. You can find those staff people, if you're a city public works staff who's interested in taking action in a certain way, and you don't want to, why recreate when you can duplicate what somebody else has done? You can find that other public works individual at that neighboring community and do that peer-to-peer, exchange of ideas and get an idea of, how much it might cost or how long it might take.
And Lola, do you want to talk a little bit about Great Plains? And also on there, people should be aware there is a donate button for Great Plains to help them continue to do the great work that they're doing as well. So I'll make that pitch for you right there.
Thank you so much. Great Plains Institute is at betterenergy.org.
And there's just a wealth of information, and I loved reading through the roadmap and some other things on that page as well, and making sure that we have that continued public-private partnership, the nonprofit public-private partnership, all those things working together. I think that's really one of the overriding themes of what your organizations are trying to do, is to bring all those resources, all that information, and getting that shared so we can get to a better outcome.
Definitely.
Well, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
Thank you for joining us today. Help us spread the word by telling your friends, family, and heck, even your frenemies that they can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Luminary, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio. Pretty much anywhere you can find a podcast, you're going to find Wimmers Wilderness. To learn more about us, go to wimmerswilderness.org. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Wimmers Wilderness.